Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What's Working. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. I'm Cam Marston, the focus of the show, workplace and workforce trends, trying to uncover ideas, thoughts, trends that are shaping workplaces, workforces around us. And we do that by finding the experts in their own workplaces who can tell us what's going on, or experts who consult on other workplaces, who can observe and make the lists of what's going on to help all of us. So let me introduce today's topic or this evening's topic with a couple of pieces of data that I find exceptional and that'll lead to our guest today. The extraordinary growth of the senior population and the likelihood that they will experience advanced illness continues to rise. By 2050, the number of people on Medicare who are 80 or older will nearly triple, while the number of people in their 90s and 100s will quadruple. We've often talked about the aging population, or at least the conversation in this nation discusses frequently the aging population and the needs that are going to need to, or the opportunities that are going to need to be developed, if that's the right way to say it, to care for this aging population. We know this, that as people age, the inevitable becomes closer and closer and closer. They may differ demographically. They may differ spiritually. You can create lists as long as your arm in the ways that they differ. But what they all have in common is that they're all going to die. And I don't mean to sound crass about that, but it is an inevitable part of our lives is that they come to an end. What we also know, based on the information I've been given to prepare for today's show, that end is often not the way they want it to be. 7 in 10 people want to die at home, yet I think 2 in 10 do. Most people want and I'll give you these details when we get our guest on the line. Most people, their primary wish in their aging years is not to burden their family with the expenses needed to keep them alive. Yet, our healthcare system is designed to keep people alive as long as possible. The least important thing on these people's lists who are in their elder years and looking at death is to live as long as possible. Their number one wish, don't burden the family with expenses around my healthcare. Their number 10 wish, live as long as possible. Yet we as a society are consistently putting number 10 as number 1, keeping these people in their end-of-life situations alive as long as possible. Furthermore, an extraordinary amount of money that you and I will spend on our health care is spent in the last 2 months of our lives, with the vast majority of it coming within the last weeks of our lives. So here's the situation. We've got an aging population. They all have one thing in common. They're going to die. The death is not coming the way they would have wanted it based on the survey results we consistently see. They don't want their family burdened with their financial bills or their healthcare bills, and they want to die at home. But neither of those are happening. So in this big mix, this big scenario, enter an entrepreneurial mindset. We've got customer needs unmet. We've got large amounts of money being spent, yet still customer needs are being unmet. We've got poor communication between the healthcare providers, the palliative care providers, and the family. Who can organize this and create a system that is designed to give end-of-life care the way the patient wants it, that is cost-effective, not cheap now, and we're not talking about cheating anybody out of medical treatment, but is cost-effective and makes everybody happy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Greer Myers has been a friend of mine for as long as I've moved back to Mobile 10 or 12 years ago. He lived across the street, and I've always wondered specifically what it is that he does. And I took this opportunity of this radio show to reach out to him and say, Greer, let's talk about, and this sounds crass, don't get upset at me, let's talk about the business of death and what it is that you and your company have done to make this process more emotive to the people involved, more manageable, more cost efficient, so that the healthcare providers, the patients, and the family's needs are all met in a cost-effective way. That's what we're going to do. When we get back from break, I'll have Greer Myers on the line. He'll be telling us about the company that he's created, I think maybe recently as part of the sale. and the reason for it, the opportunity he saw, what they did to coordinate this thing, and where it stands today. This is going to be interesting. Greer, by the way, is one of the most intelligent people I've met. Be prepared for lots of syllables in each word. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. We'll be back with Greer Myers after this break.
Think about how people really see you. The kid at the drive-thru just sees a coffee drinker.
Please pull forward.
Your local barista sees the person who loves a smiley face in their latte.
See you next time.
It's kind of the same way with insurance. Other insurance companies just see a customer, but a State Farm agent sees more. They see you as a neighbor. Your State Farm agent is here to get to know who you really are, so they can help life go right.
Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, in Mobile at 666-1616.
Even if we don't meet in person, Regions is still here for you. We make it easier for you to stay informed and in control with online and mobile banking. You can check balances, transfer money, pay bills, deposit checks with Regions Mobile Deposit, and even set up helpful alerts no matter where you are. We're here to make it easier to bank your way. Learn more at regions.com/tools. Regions Bank, member FDIC.
The best, most cost-efficient ways to talk to customers about who you are and what you do is through signs, simple, effective signs. Hi, I'm Cam Marston, host of What's Working. Signorama is the Mobile area's leader in helping you design and build signs advertising your business. What kinds? All kinds of signs, all kinds. Find Signorama on Facebook or at signorama-mobile.com. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. On the line with me is my friend Greer Myers. Greer and I have known each other quite a while, and I'm finally going to get to the root of what it is that Greer does. Greer, thank you for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Thanks, Cam. Glad to be here. I know we've talked a lot in the past about kind of what I've been doing over the past 5 years. I'm the president of Turnkey Health, and we sold the business back in the midst of COVID, which was pretty amazing. About 2 months ago to a company called CareCentrix, which manages post-acute care. So things outside of the hospital are coming out of the hospital, and the home care business.
You are no longer involved with Turnkey Health, or do you maintain a role with that company?
I am still involved in a transitional role. So we sold the company, but the company is intact. It's essentially run as a division of CareCentrix.
Okay. But what I want to talk about is the development of Turnkey Health and what it is that you do, and specifically what is the problem that Turnkey Health decided to address. And perhaps it would be a good part of the story is for you to share with us where the realization of this problem came from, where you saw an entrepreneurship opportunity within it. So one of the things that I think is so important is to acknowledge, from the point of view of Turnkey Health, is the graying of the American population, how people are getting older. And I think it was in 25% of the American population is going to be over 60 or over 80, something like that. This rapid aging of the population. And the thing that they all have in common is that they're going to die. And the thing that most of them have in common is that end of life scenario is not going to be what they had hoped for, what the family had hoped for, perhaps even what their primary care physician had hoped for. And there's tons of dollars being thrown at it. In fact, I'm holding a piece of paper here, and this is interesting. It's perhaps something you can elaborate on as we get started. Spending on inpatient hospital services was 7 times higher among decedents than survivors. They spend 7 times more on people that died than lived. And you'd think that's not an outcome that we should boast about. Maybe we can jump off there. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah, I guess I'll start from the beginning, or where I saw the problem. And I started working in the hospice and palliative care space back in around 2004. And from 2004 through 2013, really worked in the space in direct care, or providing direct care in hospice and palliative care. And I apologize for the dogs barking.
I haven't had a phone call in since mid-March where there wasn't a barking dog on it. It's become a part of the life. Yeah.
Cue up somebody working on the house, but I'll try to minimize the dog damage. working in that space, what I saw is that when patients were admitted to hospice, so a defined Medicare benefit requiring that you be certified that you're terminally ill, having 6 months or less to live based on a physician's estimate, the people that were coming in really late. So they would elect a hospice benefit with 7 days. I think the median length of stay at the time was around 10 days in hospice, which it's supposed to be around 6 months if it's managed appropriately. So it's a big, big problem. And it was universal what we saw. So we're caring for thousands of terminally ill patients every day. And the people that we cared for were very appreciative of the service. And almost the universal response was, I wish I'd known about this earlier. I wish we hadn't done what we did. I wish I'd spent the last 6 months on the beach with my wife instead of going to chemotherapy. Nobody told us that it really wasn't going to work. And my wife was just going to be really sick for 6 months and then die. And that was the start of the thought around it was, how do you get ahead of this? And there wasn't really a mechanism to get ahead of the end of life process. We knew that there was talent out there to be able to have these really difficult conversations and to take care of people with serious or advanced illness. And we thought that the people that were best capable of doing that out in the community, so community-based palliative care, were nurses and social workers. So we had a problem which was extreme high spend during the end of the last 6 to 12 months of life. We had a problem where people were not self-identifying the issue. Physicians weren't identifying, referring to hospice or palliative care. And then you didn't have a way to really structure it. And so we came with the thesis that if you could identify individuals earlier in the disease process, engage with them in a meaningful way, and then use a systematic approach to being able to manage that care delivery and that palliative care, that you could achieve great results. And so we started doing that in 2005 and proved it out and published an article in the Journal of Palliative Medicine where we showed that we decreased the medical loss ratio, which is a fancy term for how much money you're spending on patients. We decreased that by 20%. And then there's another factor in there that increased it another 15%. So we saved basically 35% versus the control group. And we also achieved fantastic satisfaction scores. And we improved, most importantly, the median and mean length of stay in hospice with our engaged population versus the control group. So what it told us was, if you can find the members earlier using data, so predictive analytics and AI, if you can find these patients earlier in the health system and you can engage with them, then you can have create a good dialogue, establish goals of care, establish advanced care plans, and then create a better set of communication, not only with the patient themselves, but the caregiver, extended family, and the physician community.
So I'm surprised that this hasn't happened before, though. Why have we gotten off on this runaway train of trying to keep people alive as long as possible, spend as much as we can on them, and kind of, you didn't say this, I'll say it, keeping them in the dark about their prognosis? Why have we just come around to this?
I think culturally, the United States is very different. And the way the system was set up, it's set up to avoid the conversation. And from a cultural perspective, we tend to avoid the elephant in the room at the end of life. We also don't tend to inform, or haven't tended to inform, individuals really what their true situation is. We haven't had a good infrastructure or incentive system to help people understand their disease state, the progression of their disease, and what that means for them and in their remaining life. So we tend to focus on quantity of treatment versus the quality of remaining life. And it's a very different mindset. The other thing, if you remember back to the Obama years, Nancy Ann DeParle, who was on our board, was former, I guess she was the czar for Obamacare for Obama. They brought up end-of-life care, and then you had the word death panel thrown out there. And,
you're right. That was a big polarizing thing.
Yeah. Third real issue, it's like, oh, hold on, you're going to withhold care. And it's not about withholding care. It's about making sure that the care that's delivered is concordant with the patient's wishes, how they want to live the remainder of their life. And that still in the United States is a rarity.
Yeah, so we avoid talking about it. Is there part of this that is, I can't help but wonder about our litigious society, if there's the doctor who may be saying, listen, if if I get accused by this patient's family of not doing everything I can to keep them alive, they're going to sue my pants off. Where does that fit into this?
I don't think it fits in that much. I think there are some things going on systemically where there is an incentive to treat, right? Because there's a payment scheme for that, where you're being paid for a hospitalization, you're being paid to treat a patient. There's also the mentality, I think, in the physician community, and I wouldn't speak for them, but for what I've seen, there's a desire to want to fix and not to give up. And I hear that a lot, and particularly in oncology, where oncologists just don't want to give up. They feel like they're failing their patient if they don't continue to try to treat that patient aggressively. So that exists as well. And the government is trying to work to change that through different and alternate payment models in oncology and different payment models with direct contracting. So there's a lot going on at the federal level through CMS and CMMI, the Innovation Center within the government, to change that mentality and make it more quality oriented, and put the accountability for the spend and accountability for quality care downstream onto the providers, as opposed to having it be purely insurance based.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there was your idea, as you've articulated it to me in this brief conversation, makes complete sense. But there was probably somewhere along the line that you got pushback to the concept. Either this is the way the system works, Greer, and what you're asking is pie in the sky, but it'll never work. Or there's no way that these, we talked about it, the doctors, who I like the way you describe it, their mentality is to fix, and asking them to change that mentality. The very nature of their profession is that they don't give up. Where was the pushback into trying to integrate this idea into the system?
Well, we did get some pushback, but I'll make an analogy of what we did in order to avoid that and circumvent it. And for some people that may be listening to this, they may be too young to remember direct-to-consumer advertising of drugs that used to be really prolific, and it's still out there. But the drug companies knew that if they went direct to a patient and put an ad on television, based on that ad, X percent of people would ask for that prescription, and Y percent would actually get that prescription, and then Z percent would actually fill it, and then so on and so forth. So by going direct to the patient and creating the demand, it was kind of circumventing the system, which was problematic. And that direct to consumer advertising is banned in Europe. But for us, since we're going direct to the patient and really informing them, it helps equip the patient with the information to be able to have a more informed conversation with their physician. So it's a lot easier for the patient to bring it up and say, hey, what's really going on? What do you think my prospects are for the next 6 months? How can I, here are my goals. This is what I want to have happen over the next 6 to 12 months or with my remaining life. That's a better conversation, because it's not the physician bringing it up and having to bring up a really difficult conversation that many people are not comfortable having. It's the patient broaching it. And so it's a similar concept to DTC, but it's that. So The only pushback we've gotten has been misunderstandings, where a physician may think that we've admitted a patient to hospice without his permission, which is not possible. You have to have a physician's orders. And when they figure out what we're doing, they actually have more patients they want to send our way, which is great.
Let's talk when we get back from break about how you found these patients and how you brought this new type of care or mentality of care to them. I'm also very interested in the predictive analytics that I've read in this, and your use of artificial intelligence to tell you which patients are going to need your services the most. And we'll get into that when we get back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions.
I'm Matt Armbruster with Ransom Ministries. We help people in our community that most others have given up on. Please donate your unwanted electronics to Ransom Recycling. We teach life skills, job readiness, and job creation through our electronic recycling program. We take anything with a cord: Find us at ransomministries.com, or you can call us at 251-751-0044.
Human Resource Departments spend countless hours on insurance billing mistakes, Obamacare rules, and compliance. Employee benefits serve the purpose of recruiting, retaining, and rewarding employees. We can handle all of your benefit needs with cost-effective products, employee enrollments, and handle your HR issues. Benefit admin doesn't have to be complicated. My name is Michael Cowart Jr. of the Cowart Group, and we specialize in helping businesses with their employee benefit packages. Visit cowartassociates.com.
On the line with me is Greer Myers. Greer has recently sold his company called Turnkey Health, and they are a company that provides, perhaps, Greer, a suite of services to people and the healthcare providers and the palliative care providers and everybody involved in end-of-life decisions. Sold this company, and Greer, in order for you to create the push-through or pull-through model, however we're describing it, you had to find the patients to introduce them to this idea. And I figure that must have been a touchy subject. End-of-life conversations are not easy. How did you go about finding your test patients?
Yeah, it was one of the core tenets of what we had to do, because the normal model, like we talked about before, is people would progress through the health system and their disease would become more and more progressive, and they would decline and eventually hit an acute care facility like a hospital, and they would get a referral into hospice or to palliative care with very little time left after having experienced just a miserable last 6 to 12 months. And then they die shortly thereafter. We went about it differently in that we're using claims data from predominantly Medicare Advantage, but also commercial health plans. So they're getting all of the claims data based on, a hospital filing a claim or a physician filing a claim, or any healthcare service that's being rendered is in a claim, so an electronic record. And what we did is we defined what over-medicalization was, or an inappropriate death. So we looked at data from a misery perspective and said, what is misery for the last 6 to 12 months of life? And then find those individuals in data and look through regressive modeling to identify those members earlier so you can see patterns emerging. So somebody is not having a miserable experience, but based on the claims that are being presented in advance and the demographics of that individual, you can look at it and say, this person is likely to experience an over-medicalized or inappropriate death in the next 6 to 12 months. And that's how we built our regressive analytics to identify these members before they enter into that phase of the end of life, because we knew we wanted to improve the quality of remaining life and not focus on as much the quantity of remaining life or the quantity of medical treatment. So things like, we're looking for advanced markers that somebody might have chemotherapy in the last 14 days of life, multiple hospitalizations in the last 30 days of life. There are a bunch of different factors. It's an amazingly complex model that a group built for us based out of California and continues to evolve. It's highly predictive as well. We're on our 5th iteration of the model, and it continues to improve, and we continue to improve it with data and some of the machine learning techniques that we've employed over the last 5 years.
Let me pause right here and make sure I understand. You were able to get claims data from sick patients that essentially said, based on what we know, you're not miserable now, but you're about to be. And
Correct.
We are going to try to come get in between you and the misery right now and make it better for you. You're not miserable now, but you're about to be. It sounds like one of my parenting techniques. But so you were able to identify these people, which means that the data must be accessible fairly real time. I mean, you're not looking through data that's 6 or 8 or 10 months old, are you?
There is a lag in the data, and there's typically a 3-month lag, but so we do miss people that accelerate fast towards the end of life. So there are certain for instance, if you're diagnosed with a late stage cancer and you pick it up late, you may only have a month to live, or some people have days to live. We're not going to find those individuals in the data. We did the model is built so it takes into consideration that 3-month lag. One of the interesting things that we've done with CareCentrix, and they were a partner of ours before they acquired the company, they have actual feet on the street in hospitals doing post-discharge management. And they also have more real-time claims data and prior authorization data that bolsters our predictive analytics. And so that was part of the reason it made a lot of sense to join the two companies together.
So at some point, somebody had to reach out to this patient and say, we've found you through data, and here's what we think your future is going to be like. We need you to have this conversation with the doctor. At some point, you or somebody on your team had to walk through that hospital door or make a phone call or go knock on their home door and have this conversation. Am I correct?
Yeah, and it's done in different ways, but typically it's the health plan that's paying for the service. So that health plan that's paying for the service would send a letter in advance, and it would be a very generic letter saying we have some additional supports that may be of use to you. You'll get a phone call in the next week or so with somebody to introduce themselves and talk about how we might be able to help you. And from there, we do create these networks of palliative clinicians out in the communities in which individuals live. That individual would reach out to the patient. And as you can imagine, the whole robocalling thing and just general issues around cell phones it can be a challenge. But our overall enrollment rate, we have that list, right? And we identify people over a certain percent at risk for experiencing an over-medicalized or inappropriate death. We reach out to all those people over that limit every single month. So we'll have a new list every month that's identified through our predictive analytics. And those local clinicians reach out, and we tend to enroll about 56% of everyone that's identified, which is a staggering number when you think about today. You're unlikely to pick up the phone, period, if you don't see somebody calling. Yeah. And then you've got a random person, but it's the way in which it's couched. So we're not telling them, hey, we found you because you look really sick. You're not saying, hey, we have palliative care and we think you may be appropriate for hospice. We reach out and we say, hey, you were identified as potentially, needing some extra support. We've got this program put together. We'd love to come out and talk to you about what's going on with your healthcare and see if there's anything we can do for you.
Yeah.
And I'm just right here on the corner from you. I can meet you at a coffee store. I can meet you at your house, whatever it is. And it tends to be well adopted. Once you build that relationship and build trust with the patient and with the caregiver, that is the linchpin in getting things done, is making sure that there's a trust between that clinician, whether that's a nurse or a social worker, and the patient and the caregiver. And once that trust is built and they understand it, then you can actually accomplish great things together as a team with, that caregiving team. And you can bend the curve really for the end of life experience.
So you had to so I understand how you recruited the patients, but you had to recruit these palliative care people to make those phone calls. So you travel around perhaps and introduce yourself, and here's what we're doing, and we'd like some volunteers to help us test this case. And I would suspect, here's Cam Marston's hypothesis, that these palliative care people are sincerely interested, based on the nature of their work, in making the end of days much more pleasant for their patients. Is that correct?
The palliative care groups that we contract with, so we go out and create structured groups and teams of palliative clinicians. So it's through a contract. Now, it's not on a one-off basis because we have to train them. They use our tools. They enter all the information in our system so we can report it back. They're really part of our team, but they're essentially subcontracted. It's a very interesting model because it's a network model of clinicians where they understand and can follow processes. They're very skilled at what they do, and we're essentially taking latent capability out in the market that isn't being applied to this issue and applying it to a brand new issue to solve for a problem that many have not been able to solve for.
Yeah. Hearing you talk and knowing you, very capable of discussing this subject. This subject is a very emotional subject. So you have, and there's a handful of professions that I'm aware of that mix these things, one of which is healthcare, of course, but is a very vulnerable subject in a very science or data-driven decision-making process. And being able to mix the ability to talk about those two is a rare gift. The other one being financial services, people's emotional feelings about money and the very scientific and predictive way people can invest and make more money. It's a very delicate process. How did you guys figure, your career has been in this, but how did you figure how to walk that line most appropriately when dealing with all the different stakeholders in this process?
I think early on, Cam, what we've discovered is if we just focused on quality interactions, then we didn't have to pay attention to anything else. I mean, yes, we had to build the predictive analytics. Yes, we had to build the platform in which all of these engagements and encounters are captured and all the data is captured. And we had to create the network structure and the legal piece. But in the end, when we enforce this all the time is we just focus on quality interactions with the patient and everything else will come in terms of savings, in terms of building the business, and being myopic about just focus on the patient and doing a good quality job. We open every single one of our weekly meetings with a patient story, which is a really cool thing to hear. Because you are so buried in the business of business, sometimes you can lose sight of the fact that you're caring for a lot of people who are suffering from a serious or advanced illness. So really trying to get down to the patient level to make sure that we're focused on that and just good quality interactions.
Interesting how that continues to come up, Greer, in these interviews that I've been doing for 3 years now is the quality of the interaction with the end user. Whether that be programming, whether that be an eyeball-to-eyeball conversation, the ability to have that tends to solve a lot of the other issues that could arise in the background. It seems to be a consistent theme in what I'm learning through my own very offhand and non-scientific research is focus on the quality of the interaction with that individual. When we come back from break, Greer, I want to hear about what is the term you used? Over-medicalized, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and what exactly that means. And then I want to hear what this company is getting from their purchase from you. They've got to have identified a market element, a cost savings element, and I want you to clarify exactly what it is that they saw in this product that you developed that will make them a stronger company. And we'll get into that when we get back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions.
Life insurance is one of those subjects that make people want to change the subject rather than admit they probably don't have enough. I'm State Farm agent Allison Horner, and that's why I focus on how the benefits of life insurance actually live on by asking people to think in terms of life without having to sell the house insurance, or life without having to give up college insurance. Find out how the benefits of life insurance can live on for your family. Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, and get to a better state with State Farm.
That's the sound of rush hour. Hello, recess.
Mom!
Work from home is a lot of work.
Mommy!
Even though we're a little further apart right now, we're still in this together. Regions is donating this ad to local food banks to shine a light on them as they feed our neighbors in need. Learn how you can help or get help at regions.com/foodbank. Regions Bank, member FDIC.
This is Cam Marston, host of What's Working. Jim Mitchell and his team at Signorama have provided all types of signage for nearly every event I've been a part of for years. I know his team's creativity, their multitude of products, and how easy they are to work with. His no-mistake Signorama is South Alabama's marketplace leader. Find Signorama on Facebook, call 634-0100, or visit next to Mullinex Ford on Airport Boulevard. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. On the line, Greer Myers recently sold the company that he birthed not too long ago now called Turnkey Health. And Greer, prior to the break, I wanted to talk to you about over-medicalization. That's an impressive term. I want to know what it means, and people that are listening know what it means as well as how to identify it. And then what the company that you sold Turnkey Health to saw that made them want to make that purchase. So let's start with over-medicalization. What exactly does it mean, and how does it relate to this conversation? I think I know, but I want to hear you describe it.
From a really practical perspective, imagine an experience that you would not want to go through, or would not want your loved one to go through in the last 6 to 12 months of life. So things like the chemotherapy within 14 days of death, multiple hospitalizations in the last month of life, multiple acute care visits during the last month of life, over $50,000 in the expenses in the last 6 months of life. You know that those things, there's misery behind all of the data. And that's really how we define over-medicalization. It's defined, and then that definition is turned into the data for identification, kind of back into the data using regressive analysis like we talked about before.
So it's people spending an extraordinary amount of money on things that create misery in the patient that won't have any positive outcome in their medical treatment.
Yeah, or if you think about it as unplanned care or burdensome care,
yeah,
or undesired care, avoidable medicalization is one way to think about it.
So there's a lot of folks, Greer, that are about your and my age that are looking at parents that are getting ill, and they're probably thinking what I'm thinking. When this time comes, I want to make sure this conversation happens with my own family, both my siblings as my parents and their care providers. How would one go about finding this for themselves? As for example, for me, I'm the son. My parents are still alive. How would I go out and say, hey, I've heard about this. This is what I want. How do people find it?
Well, I think there are different ways to go about it. I mean, the first challenge is just being knowledgeable about options that exist for the last 6 months of life. The resources that are available if someone is going through a serious or advanced illness. So if you've got a loved one that's going in and out of the hospital and has what you would think was a kind of a limited life prognosis, so less than 2 years, less than a year of life left, just as a litmus test, then the best way to do it, because it's not widespread, but the best way to find help is to either reach out to a company that has palliative care where you live, and you can find those individuals. A lot of times they're embedded in hospitals. Many times hospice and palliative care companies will have palliative care clinicians, and they can help create that better conversation. They'll really kind of not diagnose from a diagnostic perspective, but diagnose what the issue is and set an individual on a good path for a positive or more positive end-of-life experience. There are documents out there that are really good conversation starters in terms of being able to have a meaningful conversation with your loved one. Documents like 5 Wishes. There are documents that are being promoted, and they're different by state in terms of what's being used or what can be used as a proxy for end-of-life decision-making. But 5 Wishes is a good one. There's a company based out of San Francisco that was started by a physician called Endwell. Very interesting company, and they're really promoting a better end-of-life experience. And that started about, I think, 2.5 years ago. They have a lot of resources. So if you look at the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, they also have resources. So there are resources that are available out there. And I know that our generation, we tend to Google things. Those are things that I would Google. And you can find a great number of resources. If you need somebody local, you can probably find somebody locally that can help, and they just would bill insurance for it. But people don't know that exists, right? And a lot of people misperceive palliative care as being hospice. And while hospice is palliative in nature, hospice is not palliative care. So palliative care doesn't mean you're dying. It's somebody who can help manage the symptoms, both physical and spiritual and psychosocial and everything else. You don't have to forego curative care while you're receiving palliative care. That's different. Obviously in hospice, you're foregoing curative care and you're only getting comfort care, and it's under the Medicare benefit.
Tell us what the company that bought you out saw and what you created that made them want to pay for it. And I assume there was some significant cost savings involved. Tell me more about what they saw. How'd you sell this thing?
We did go out in a process. So we had different people evaluate the business and presented to a number of different groups that were interested in purchasing Turnkey. We had been working with CareCentrix for almost 2 years as a partner. And what we had been seeing with CareCentrix is that their goal was to make sure that patients stay at home. And they had gone from providing home health and DME management services to post-acute services. So managing where somebody goes, what's the best setting and treatment plan for somebody post-hospitalization. And then they went from there to managing truly the 90 days post-hospitalization, what that spend is and the trajectory of that patient. And as we were working with them as a partner, we fit in that niche because we're part of the post-acute care continuum. And it fit really well within their existing infrastructure of making sure patient quality is the focus and keeping people at home is the focus. And so our focuses were very similar, and we fit in a very specialized niche in their portfolio of solution offerings.
So they saw that. So what you haven't articulated, perhaps I missed it, not impossible, is a huge savings. What they bought was a new way to care for patients, but not to generate more revenue or save more money. Am I correct in that, or did I miss that?
No, that's correct. We're essentially selling to the same clients.
Yeah.
So the value proposition, while with the health plan, so you're selling to a health plan or some entity that's taking risk for the medical cost of those patients, which are their members. The value was the ability to save 20 or 30% for a health plan and get paid for it. So the return on investment that we're able to generate is pretty substantial given the dollars that are being spent at the end of life. So yeah, it made a more complete solution for them to be able to sell.
Yeah.
But also the financial return on it is substantial.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that now. Yeah. Interesting. So Greer, congratulations. What a remarkable job of identifying this niche with this increasing elderly population on the horizon here, and creating a product that gets both the most vulnerable emotions and sounds like the most intricate data in science all together, and then rolling it out in a controlled way to build the results, and then selling the company. Is this what you had in mind when you began this several years ago?
It is. It's about on the timeline that we wanted it to be on. We did, as you're aware, we sold the other company in Clara to Humana in January, and then sold Turnkey to CareCentrix in April. So it was around the 5-year mark from when we started.
Wow.
It's about in line. Yeah.
What are you going to do next?
Sleep.
So I know you and I saw each other in the airport quite a bit. You were on the road quite a bit, getting this thing built and introducing the concepts, et cetera. Do you think you'll ever travel at that pace again?
I don't know. I don't even know if it's going to be practical. I haven't been back in the airport since February, and we did this transaction. So we completed the Humana sale back in December, signed it, but closed in January. We closed this deal, sold Turnkey in the midst of COVID. We have yet to see our new owners face to face.
Oh, really?
So everything has been virtual in terms of the integration for the last 2 months. It's kind of a wild experience to do everything via teleconference and video chat.
No kidding. Yeah. Particularly on on your baby, something that you've worked with. You'd like to look somebody in the eye and shake a hand and know that you've done a good job and it's just been unavailable to you. But knowing you as I do, I can't imagine you sitting around for too long. And I'm not talking about redoing the countertops in the kitchen. I'm talking about where is your brain going to push you next? What is the next problem to solve? And the problem you solved helped lots of people. That's got to be cool. I mean, you didn't just sell the company, but you made life better for lots of people. That's fantastic. It's got to make you feel good.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to do well and do good.
Yeah.
That's something that I think whatever I end up doing next in healthcare is very attractive. I wouldn't want to do something that wasn't meaningful and wasn't innovative.
Yeah.
And it has to improve the current state of healthcare. So, I don't know yet. I'm not under pressure to figure it out, but hopefully I'll find something in the future that's an interesting role or interesting opportunity to improve healthcare in the United States.
We love it. Don't turn your brain off, Greer. Don't give up. I think it's whatever you choose is going to raise the tide for all of us, and I appreciate it. Greer Myers is the recent owner, but now has sold his company that he built just a handful of years ago called Turnkey Health, designed to create the palliative care process and make it much more beneficial to everyone involved. A weakness in our nation, quite frankly. Greer, thank you for your time. Folks, you're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. I'll be back after this break for final comments.
Do you sometimes wonder about different money topics, but struggle to find the answers? The Every Dollar Counts podcast with Gulf Coast experts Josh Knoll and Jay Stubbs is made for those folks serious about their financial plan and looking for answers. Josh and Jay dedicate their time to explaining the various services and products available, as well as discussing lifestyle and money interests of the modern-day family. Tune in to Every Dollar Counts on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else you get your favorite podcasts. Do you have a plan to protect your income if you can't work? We'd all like to believe that we'll never be disabled, but the reality is it could happen to you. And if it does, will your income be protected, your family be cared for? Richard Otts has served the Gulf Coast since 1997. If you'd like more information about disability insurance, contact Richard 251-342-8917. That's 251-342-8917.
Greer mentioned the sincerity of the communications. In these difficult times, if they can sit down with that patient who is receiving palliative care or they've determined should be receiving palliative care, and frankly, the future doesn't look so bright, if they can have a sincere and honest and clear conversation with them, they will be able to effectively test the hypothesis on which his business was built. The comment of the sincere communication is one that we've heard over and over throughout the show. Doing it for the right reason, delivering service for the right reason, seeing the customer's needs for the right reason, not for the purpose of growing the business that you're delivering, but from what that customer needs. And this is a message that I could take to heart, quite frankly. I suppose we all could, but I know that I could. I'm often looking at the profit motive behind the reason that I want to help people. And if I could instead focus more on what their intense needs are right now and communicate that I have the capability of helping them, I think I would see a change in my own business. I was glad to get this reminder from Greer. What a remarkable thing as well. And it's a talent that I don't have, to be able to develop a business plan and to say in 5 years, I will have built, developed, and sold a business, and to execute on it without flaw. At least that's the impression that I got. Greer comes from a line of savvy and smart people, and I don't question, I shouldn't be surprised, perhaps that's a better way of saying it. I shouldn't be surprised with his success. But what he has done here and articulated in this interview is something that is a skill that, frankly, I don't have. I wish I did. I wish I could see the goal and develop a business to achieve that goal. But too often for me, I'm simply feeling my way through in the night, trying to, the lights are off and I'm trying to find my way through an unfamiliar room with my hands out in front of me, feeling my way along, metaphorically speaking. So it's impressive to hear somebody that can develop a plan like this and execute on a plan and meet and execute on it flawlessly, again, the way we heard it. It's amazing that this inevitable part of all of our lives, being the death, is still received with such strangeness in our nation. I guess Greer mentioned that in Europe and particularly in England, it's not that way. But for some reason here in the U.S., it's a conversation to be avoided, to be neglected. We act like it surprises us that this happens, that people die, that people close to us die, and we're unprepared. in our systems, our medical systems, our palliative care systems, perhaps, aren't designed with this inevitability in mind. They're designed to keep us alive as long as possible. And even though the data would suggest that most of us don't want to be laying in bed with our life extended without a clear directive, without a clear timeline, that's invariably what it is that happens. That's the nature of medicine. It's the nature of caregiving. It's the nature, I think, of what people that are in decision-making positions for loved ones do. Let's do everything to keep this individual alive, we say. There is still the possibility of a miracle. Though science would suggest not, there is still the possibility of a miracle. Therefore, we are going to do everything we can to keep this individual alive. Yet that's not what they want, and it's not reasonable expectations. Perhaps there's some insight into each of us through that the inevitable, the absolute inevitable, is something that we would prefer to not acknowledge. And it was a lesson taken clearly to me. So, interesting content from Greer. I'm grateful for his willingness to share that. I congratulate him on the building of a business and being able to sell it as well as quickly and well as he did. A thorough business plan executed perfectly. Folks, the What's Working franchise continues to grow. We're grateful for the support that our advertisers are giving us. We're grateful for the continued growth. We're getting emails every week from people that are listening, that want more involvement, that want information or requesting topics. Cam, can you find a business that struggles with blank so that we can hear how they're doing it and apply it to our own business? And if that's something you would consider or that you have in mind, please reach out to us. I'd love to talk to you about what your issues are and how we can find the guests that can solve that issue for you. You can learn who upcoming guests are via our social media stuff. We're trying to continue that presence. Search for us on Instagram. Search for us on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn and search for us on Twitter. We're keeping those activities going. You can subscribe to this show as a podcast. After each show is broadcast, it's converted into a podcast. And if you go to whatsworkingcam.com, again, whatsworkingcam.com, no apostrophes, you'll find the show as well as the different ways to hear it and subscribe to the show. And if you do indeed subscribe to the show, please rate the show. You wouldn't believe how important those ratings are in getting the show notice on the different podcasting sites. Also, if you want to get involved, the phone number is 251-260-8100. Again, 251-260-8100. That's an unmanned line. You'll leave a voicemail. The voicemail will come to my inbox, and I will reach out to you about whatever your issue is. You can also text us at that number, 251-260-8100. The same process holds true. I'll reach back out to you and discuss whatever it may be. It's an interactive show. It's growing. The conversation continues to get more exciting and more specific. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. John Thompson is the show's producer with Eyeon Digital, EYEON Digital. Check them out. And a special thanks, as always, to Kristen Ogden for arranging these interviews. We'll have another show next week. Have a good week, everybody.